Now it's preparing.
There we go. It says it's doing it now.
Yes, it does. So each time when I go live, it still feels exciting, although I do not know how many times I did.
I'm on my third week now live. At first I was so anxious. Now it's still fun. You know, I think there's an excitement level when you go live that's different from a recorded video.
Absolutely. It's a different vibe because you know that people can interact with you live. Hello, hello, hello. We are live on YouTube. What is interesting, hold on, let me shut down the sound. Now it's better because there is a lag and we started to hear us talking.
Mm-hmm.
So today, me and Frank finally getting together to talk about a marvelous talk which truly fascinated both of us for the last few months. What's happening is just defining any logic, at least from the first glance. And we are going to speak about real estate in Ontario, in GTA, about economy, about uncertainty, and what the heck is going on right now and where we are going forward.
What's going on exactly?
Yes. So I prepared quite a few stats thanks to Frank, who seeded a lot of this information. And I wanted to start with what we want to focus on today. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't divert and go off track if something is really important or somebody is asking some questions, but we want to focus on what's up with the GTA real estate. And ultimately, a lot of people and of course, a lot of professionals at the back of their minds are thinking, is it a good time to buy? Is it a good time to actually exit the market? Well, homes are in a bubble, clearly, because look at the prices of condos. What's happening with condos? They're losing value day by day. And with the office spaces dead, and all professionals now forever will be working remote or mostly downtown becoming a ghost town. So what the heck is going on and going to happen?
Mm-hmm. I get those questions every day.
Exactly. Moreover, I get these questions quite often because of my exposure. So first and foremost, I wanted to introduce Frank. And Frank is a broker and SVP of sales with Salisbury International Realty. And this is a wonderful, wonderful short intro for Frank, but I would really love to ask a question. Frank, how did you come to work in real estate? What brought you here and what keeps you here?
That's a good question, Mila. Thank you. I just want to thank you as well for organizing this and helping me because you're much more experienced with the live streaming and all this. So thank you. And please help me get through this. So yeah, so I got into real estate about 12 years ago now. So during the last financial crisis that the world faced, 2008, I prior to being in real estate, I was actually a salesperson with a company called Lenovo. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them. It's a technology company, massive firm that sells the ThinkPad type products, you know, the really nice business line computers, the black ones. So I worked there through university and I was there for 4.5 years. Even after university, I stayed on. And at that time, the market was undergoing some shifts. And I think the US had offered a program where they could, if you relocate jobs from other countries to the US, they would, the companies would receive some benefits. So that one thing led to another, and you could see that the writing was on the wall that they were going to move the jobs elsewhere. And they even told us that in X number of months, you know, this entire office will be laid off. So start preparing yourselves, take these career, you know, retraining courses, figure out what you want to do. And I was in the lucky position that I had, I was a permanent employee. So they gave us a little bit of a severance package and some resources. So I just started looking into what do I want to do next? What am I interested in? I was still quite young, and real estate was always something I was interested in. I actually ended up going to a conference, and the headliner on the conference was Donald Trump, and it was called the Wealth Expo. So he, I guess
Yes,
they
I
put
remember
his face.
those times.
He was selling his branding onto a conference, and it was actually quite a good conference. He didn't show up. But he did. He was on the big screen uh, at one portion. But I actually went there and I looked around. I went to all the different booths and talked to different people from multifamily real estate to people selling courses on how to sell more real estate. There's brokerages, there's developers, there's all many different types of people from the industry. And I was just really excited about the business. I felt like I wanted to do it. And it was actually the main part. The trigger was when Tony Robbins was on the main stage, and he got a room full of maybe like 20,000 people jumping up and down, and that really it got to me. You know, after that, I started to I studied to become how to become a realtor, took the courses, and this was even before Lenovo had finished. So going into the once they laid us off, like when it was finally done, I already had my license ready, and I had also used some of that severance to buy a ring for my now wife. And we went to Hawaii, and it was a great time, honestly. Other than that, the market was really difficult for a first time getting in, but after that, I think things became a little bit easier and easier once the market started to recover, and I could actually get some deals going. I started to learn.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm still doing it because it actually still gives me juice to this day. Like I still feel excited when I get to do um, a deal and just work with people that I want to work with, and it's fun.
Thank you very much, Frank, for sharing. And I actually was smiling because clearly you got a crossback from Donald Trump and from Tony Robbins, such a an intersect.
Yeah, yeah.
And what's very obviously it still keeps you driving and keeps you going because that was quite a overlap. And what's interesting, you mentioned that you entered your new role, your new industry in difficult time.
Hmm.
Almost runs in my mind because this is obviously nobody can call this time easy.
Oh yeah, it was definitely
At the
scary
big,
times.
right, at the best stretch of imagination. And that's why I think it's actually sometimes better to enter something new when it's difficult, because then you have many options which didn't exist before. Things start breaking. They're breaking apart, and you have more pieces of Lego to put this together.
Hmm.
And then when market picks up, you already know how. And so it's an interesting perspective.
Well,
I think that worked well.
when kids are learning how to swim, sometimes the uncle or grandfather or somebody just throws them into the deep end, and then they just have to figure out a way to get going. That was basically how it felt like back in 2008. Because I think it makes sense. If I were selling my home or buying a home in 2008, or even now, I'd want to work with people that have experience, not somebody who looks like a high school student or somebody that is in their first, that's never done it before. Of course, you want to find the people you could trust the most at that time. So I had to learn
Right,
how to become trustworthy, right?
right.
And Mila, I want to know about you. How did you get into this? And what do you do? And how did you get to where you are today?
Yes, as you can see, we came a bit prepared so we can share who we are. I currently focus on working with businesses, moving them through change, which is abandoned. And we are breaking through to the next level. The metaphor which I just shared, I think it's so powerful because small or large businesses alike are breaking through and changing the ways it used to work and no longer works, like in real estate. This is exactly what we are going to speak today. And we don't want to overspend. We don't want the struggle and overwhelm. And there are things which are proven to fail. So that's what I am sharing with people, given my 20 years of experience. Now, how I got here, it's an interesting path. And I would say important for this conversation, my background, originally I'm a scientist. And I did a lot of research, and I love numbers. I speak to them, they speak to me. So I love data. Yet I always work with people, and I consulted people. I helped them change. I helped organizations change through, I would say, the last 25 years. So it's a combination of our ability to process a lot of data and figure out for me, and then share with others, what this trend may mean and where we are going, whether it's in business or technology. I've done a lot of technology transformations. And whether it's financial, I'm a CPA, so I can read numbers, again, another aspect. And with that, I truly feel this is a perfect time for people to figure out what makes sense to do next in business or in investing. And frankly, investing is, I think, on the minds of most of middle-class people, whether it's about what the heck do I do with my retirement, whatever I saved, what I'm going to invest next, and how to figure what's going to burst, what's going to stay, how to go through this difficult times. Because I think most of us realize that this is not the end, this is the beginning, economically and financially speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So that's about me.
I was thinking about you, like on the way driving, and I was thinking, this is the time where Mila is needed the most, because there's so much uncertainty, and you're somebody that's able to provide the clarity and look at how can this specific situation be made better with systems, and just analyzing information and figuring out, well, how do we get from here to where you want to be in a logical way, because so many businesses are being disrupted right now. Like we can see with all the shutdowns of all the restaurants and gyms and stores, small businesses being affected. I think it's a lot of people are having to adapt right now.
Right. And it's really hard to say for anybody who's going to survive, who's going to power shift through. I must say that I was inspired to have this event first by a couple of friends of mine who literally called me a number of times and said, what do we do? Should we do this or that? How do we move, let's say, funds? I was like, guys, I'm not a financial professional. They said, we don't care, because it's not about financial professional, how to position funds. It's about somebody who can actually put things together and put information together and process and help us process. I said, okay, then I'm going to do an event so I can share with more people, because otherwise I keep repeating the same long spiel. And I did prepare a lot of information today. So for any of you who joined us, now I wanted to take an opportunity to say thank you. I know that Gwen is here, Lena is here, somebody else is joining us live. We have a plan. We will have two parts to this conversation. I'm about to show the agenda. So what we are going to talk about first, then we will open up for questions, because we want to make sure that we give you a lot of information first, and then we want to hear your questions, your pointed opinions, which may not be in agreement with what we are saying, and it's actually perfect. We do not have to agree. I just wanted to make sure that we have clarity. You can ask us whatever it is. It is live. Just mind you are, know that it will be on YouTube. Other than that, please, you're welcome to. And we invite you, as we speak, in these two periods when me and Frank will be sharing information and having a bit of our dual conversation, there is a chat. I mentioned it in the beginning. I'll just mention it one more time. In the chat, you can put your questions at any point, so that you remember to ask them, so that we can see the chat and we can actually help each other, focusing on the areas which are of the most interest to you. So with that, I And with your permission, I want to share what we wanted to speak about today. Hope everybody's seeing it on your screen.
I can see it.
Good. So this is about solving for the puzzle which this very interesting year 2020 brought to us. Nothing works as before this year, as I said. And Frank knows much more about this, and he'll share with us stories from the trenches. Real estate is not immune. So we want to focus in the first part about where we are residential real estate wise. It's a bull market in the houses. It's a spring market in the fall. Houses are in bubble, are where we are going. And we will be talking about the most powerful and foundational principle of economics and market. It's supply and demand. So we'll talk about that. And we will talk about condos, which are dead. And then we'll have questions. And then the second part, we will focus on some aspects, very interesting aspects of commercial real estate, which data brought to us. And we'll speak a little bit about debt and lending. And finally, the question, so what? To buy or not to buy? Key things to consider. That's our plan. And with that, I would love to ask a question to our esteemed expert who is actually seeing it every day and talking to people every day. So what the heck is happening in the residential market?
It's a lot going on, Mila. So I think everyone is probably observing it from their own perspective, and what's happening depends on who you are, where you are, what are you doing. So like you said, there is obviously a lot of demand for suburban and larger housing, which makes sense. Like if we just think of it from the perspective of a user, if you were trapped inside your home, would you want to be trapped inside a box in the sky with elevators? Like the pandemic obviously makes sense that people want a backyard. People want to have their own space. People need more space because they're inside their space much more often than they used to be, right? So that opened up, I think, an inner reflection. Like people are looking in and thinking, okay, I'm inside my home for many hours a day. I used to go to the office. My kids used to be going to school. Now they're at home all the time and I don't have enough space. I'm uncomfortable. So and also from the perspective of people, if you can work from home, does it matter as much that if you live 15 minutes from the office or 45 minutes from the office? I think if you can get more space for the same price or not, or maybe less, and you're getting maybe a nicer space, you get a little backyard, get a little bit of outdoor space where you can barbecue maybe and just drive straight in with fewer neighbors. I can understand the appeal of single family homes at this point. And knowing it, I've lived in condos, I've lived in houses. I currently live in a house, and I'm really glad that we live in a house at this point because of with the pandemic, with our 2 young kids. I can't imagine being stuck, cooped up on the 12th floor, 15th floor, whatever it is. See, Mila, you're muted.
Thank you, Frank. Please remind me. Sometimes I will go on mute just to make sure that the quality of sound is good. I just wanted to, first of all, totally feel for all of us that this, of course, houses make more sense. They do make more sense as well from the psychological perspective, so to speak, because people feel more protected. And this is such a long period of time when people, especially in the beginning, they felt fear. And this fear factor is still creeping in whenever we are obviously watching the news. And it's sometimes for some people, it's no longer a fear of infection per se, but the fear of uncertainty and, okay, when it's going to end, what is going to happen to me, to my family, and of course, feeling more secure when you're having something tangible, which is on land. Every Canadian loves that concept. We know that. So psychologically, people, emotions are driving this a lot.
Definitely. I think it's really that I guess the lizard brain. It's like people feel good if you put your foot on a beach and your toes in the sand, or if you're on some grass with your bare feet. There's a grounding effect, I think, that everyone feels when they're outside or if they're on the earth. And I think it makes sense that people would want, maybe if they get scared, that they would go further out. There's also that whole psychological barrier of some people not wanting to go so far away from the security of the city and all the interactions and the people that they can get in the city. But at this moment, they're not getting that the benefit of the city as much because of the shutdowns and because the action being less, the restaurants being shut, everything that makes the appeal of downtown a little bit less at this time compared to what it usually is.
So can you share a little bit more? When we chatted, you mentioned that there is a feel almost like a spring market is here, although we're clearly moving steadily into the lowest, usually, time in the sales cycle in the market.
Well, we had a 2-month pretty much shutdown almost of the real estate market at the beginning of at the end of March, going to April and into early May. So there was a lot of uncertainty in what's going to happen. So people would generally in that time not take action unless they have to. So people that were already in this transaction cycle, so if they were caught in the middle of it, they have to obviously complete their contracts and whatever they have to do.
Mm-hmm.
But then the people that were uncertain as to what would happen, how deadly is this virus, what's going to happen, is the house prices going to plummet, they didn't know, so they hit the pause button. So I think that's why we're seeing, if you look at the year over year numbers, everything appears to be up. If you compare November this year to November last year, we're up in terms of sales and activity. It's just, but it's because we took a pause, So I look at the numbers that Treb releases now with that kind of grain of salt. Looking at that, like, you have to pay attention to that. We had shut down for a couple months, so there is that delay of some people. They're doing their transactions now.
Very, very powerful. I must say that I fully agree. And when you get to numbers, after that, I will show how I interpreted all these graphs and bars, because this is exactly, if we look at a certain point in time, then we may draw a conclusion which is wrong versus averaging out. Because
exactly.
this is a big force, the whole market and supply and demand. It cannot be truly gauged in peaks and valleys which are short.
Yeah, and I guess that's why I guess in many cases people will just look at what is the average selling price. Is it up or is it down or what? But I think that's also can misconstrue things, because the mix of what's selling can change in a short period of time. Maybe more people are now looking at houses versus the condos, so it can really it can affect the average price significantly. So I think we got to look at things in specifics and break it down. But it does appear as though people are aggressively buying real estate now, and there's a lot of factors that go into that. And I think condos, that's another thing we can talk about too, is what's going to happen with condos.
So I just brought together literally what you said the other day. These are the numbers, the first simple numbers, but point in time for November. And this is exactly what I think you mentioned, right? The sales are up a quarter and prices are up 15%. Oh my God, what's going on? The sky is falling. Houses are bubbling up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think people are seeking security, right? Like if you are in a feeling, like you said, if things are scary, where do you go to? You see obviously a lot of demand for things that are real, tangible assets like real estate. It's people are buying it and they're paying a lot for that feeling of security, or that the home. Like people are really valuing their homes more than they were before. And I think it's also the whole supply and demand thing, like you're saying.
So yes, and here I truly want to dive into two different things. The temporary effect of pandemic, fear factor, and emotional buying, and the longer term trends, because there are short term trends which are driving things one or the other way. And I think I have some interesting answers based on literally numbers. I mentioned I talked to numbers and they talk back. And are what's happening long term. And we need to truly be mindful overlaying those two and seeing, okay, what does it mean for us logically if we kind of put emotions aside.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I would love to dive into numbers. And I think I'm sharing the screen, right?
You're sharing it. Yep.
Excellent. So
Rentals.
number one,
This is obviously right now my this is my busiest area right now is condo rental market. There's a lot going on. I've done more rentals in the past month than I usually do in 3 or 4 months. So it's just people are moving around right now.
and this first bar, why I actually highlighted it, look at that. It's number of units listed. So we have 2.5 times more units
Mm-hmm.
than average in downtown. And for obvious reasons, we're actually going to go kind of literally go through these reasons. But the matter of fact is there is a lot of supply.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when there is a lot of supply?
Prices go
Obviously,
down.
the price is going down. So this is a natural force of the free market. And actually, if you think about it, again, just let's put investors and people who own these condos aside, but people who are renting, this is a wonderful, wonderful period. And they're smart enough to recognize that this is a time to shop and move around because they can get a better space for less money.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, in that sense, although it's hard for some owners, it's good for a lot of people who will have their affordability, right, in terms of percentage, what they spend on the living expenses drop, which means that those people, and of course, I realize it's not people mostly in service who, let's say, lost jobs right now, who are moving, it's professionals, but still, these people will have more disposable income. And I will drive back to what I just said in the second part of the conversation when I show you some economics. But that's a very interesting factor, number one. And I've heard from quite a few friends who are investors, that's the time to run for the hills because the rentals are down and the prices are down. Who needs condos? This is really tough. And let me show you the
Mila,
sales.
can I say something on that point of the whole run for the hills sort of mindset? I think people who own real estate are generally very astute, and they've gotten to that point where they can own real estate for a reason. And I think when they see trends like that, when they see a massive spike in inventory, they'll dig beneath the surface and figure out why is that happening, and they'll look for the clues and think about, is this a permanent thing or is this a temporary thing? Do I want to liquidate this this piece of gold that I have because the value of it dropped a little bit right now, or what's going to be in the future? And I actually I look at it and think, okay, what is the effect of the pandemic, the travel restrictions on Toronto in particular? It's massive because we have a lot of amazing universities. Like we have one of the best, we have University of Toronto, York University, Ryerson. A lot of young people from around the world come to our country to attend these schools. And if you send them a note saying you can stay in your home country and still take your degree from home and not have to move here and still get your residency status, a lot of them will make that choice to stay at their mom or dad's house back home and then still attend university. So what happens to condos is, I think it becomes clear, a lot of less demand. There's fewer people coming. So that I found really interesting. And in looking at it, people obviously see when rent prices go down, people see that they're going to negotiate with their landlords to get a lower rent, or they're going to move or upgrade into something even better for the same price, or maybe just slightly more money and get something bigger and with a better view or whatever they desire.
Absolutely. And for people who own those condos, it is truly dependent on their expenses, on their cash flow. If they can afford to carry with lower rents, then there is no reason. Again, I'm kind of moving ahead. Probably I'll park it for now and just focus on this specific one, which I found interesting. In terms of sales, the larger condos currently sell better. And the first thought, of course, it's pandemic. People want bigger space. Yes, but this is a temporary factor. Still, what's interesting, what I noticed, It's a very small percentage of condos which are 2-bedroom plus. And as we can see, the prices, right? The average selling price is higher on these bigger units because the supply is smaller and the demand is higher. So larger condos are doing better as well, I think, totally for the very reason which you mentioned, when smaller units were rented by either travelers or students. This currently demand is down and a lot of people are selling. So again, different pockets behave in a slightly different way.
There's also like way more smaller units when you look at just what the builders have been building. Because investors are a big portion of the purchasers for these new developments, you get such a big percentage of units being small. And even those 2-bedrooms some of them might be sub 700 square feet, and they've gotten really good at squeezing the sizes and making them more efficient. And so that truly family size sort of condo is very hard to find, and you're not going to see the prices decline on those massively, because it gets to a certain point where you can rent a house, you can buy a house if the margin is too much different, or you can look at, do I want to live in Innisfil and pay 800,000 for a house, or do I want to live in downtown Toronto and pay that price? Like there's a push and pull effect.
So I wanted to run through a few other numbers and pretty much drive home what Frank was seeing from the analysis perspective. So in the condo rental market, looking again at supply versus demand, we do have 250% increase in downtown of units listed. The rented units is 30% more, which Frank perfectly alluded to and told us that the number of transactions is increasing, but it's 30%. So can you imagine how much more? 80% of the inventory is still remaining. So this is a temporary, that's the key thing, down pressure on these prices. So there are two options for people who own those condos. If they can carry, it makes sense to carry. If they cannot carry, then obviously they have to sell, but they may be better off selling later. Not now, because again, these down pressure is temporary until the ban on travel, etc., is lifted.
And I think people are taking that sort of approach, thinking, what do I do? How do I sustain this? And you have people sitting on a big pile of cash. So a lot of the investors have equity positions, so they're maybe not as worried about a few months of vacancy versus potentially selling into maybe lesser value than they could potentially get. So it's a trade-off, and I think and even a lot of the banks were giving deferrals, right? So I think there was options for people that maybe were in negative, maybe difficult scenarios. They could ask for deferrals, and we saw that whole talk of the deferral cliff and all that. That's hasn't really necessarily materialized into massive insolvencies or any of that stuff, right?
So let me dive into the reasons here. The condo market clearly became better supplied because, as we've talked, the short term, there are 5 factors. The first one is the short-term rental market. Regulations kicked in finally in Toronto, and obviously a lot of units went on longer-term leases. So that's extra supply. And then there is a whole bunch of COVID-related factors: drop in tourism, drop in immigration, drop in international students, and coincidentally, 2020 is the record year of new units completion. So we had a lot of unusual supply from completion, and we had a huge drop in demand. So those two forces coincided and created a marvelous opportunity for renters and a temporary drop in prices and lease rates, because the only one, if you think about it, the only factor of 5 is short-term market regulations. Once those units are either sold or filled with renters, supply and demand equilibrium will continue its trajectory up. I mean, supply is under pressure, demand is growing. And if we think about, I'm not sure how much of that will materialize, but with the new government agenda and a quota of bringing in 400,000 new immigrants next year, which is unheard of. And it's for obvious reasons. I'll get to them in the second part when we discuss economy. Are clearly the demand is going to come back even stronger than before.
Definitely, yeah. That 400,000 number is a big number, obviously, and I'm sure it's going to affect us all in different ways. But in the real estate perspective, it's gonna be a lot of people. And do you think that those people are going to live an hour and a half away, or where do you think those people want to live? The ones that are coming.
I will speak to that a little bit later because I just
I know. I know your data is amazing. I love it.
So I wanted to highlight last things for those of you who love data and who actually love to operate on evidence-based, not emotional, our foundation. So we have 10% increase in sales, we have 8% increase in price, and we have a huge number of active listings. It's almost more than twice. Now, let me just ask you, forget everything what we've talked about. Let's just think numbers. So we have a twice oversupplied market and the bloody prices still increased 8%. What does it tell you as an investor, as a person who owns this?
Not to sell, pretty much. Like, I guess unless you have to, right? It's gonna, yeah, that's what it would tell me. That's why I've been telling people not to sell at this time unless they have to, right?
And I will use a term from economics. This is very, very strange, but the price of condos at this point in time almost sounds like and feels like inelastic. Economists call it inelastic when it doesn't really matter how much of a change, so to speak, of, is happening. In summary, this particular one, these numbers brought me much, much stronger ammunition to say that market ultimately it's a sum of people. The way how we approach certain things, the way how we value those things, that's the price. So people in general decided and priced condos still as an attractive investment, despite of all these 5 factors which should have brought prices. Frankly, I would expect with all these factors, prices should have been 25% down.
Well, I think it's going back to what I was saying earlier. It's the average price is somewhat misleading because the mix can be different, right? So whereas before, maybe we had a lot more 1 bedrooms and 1+ den selling. Now we're getting more 2 bedrooms, like you were saying. That really does skew the average price up. People are demanding the bigger things. And for whatever reason, either they need more space for themselves, or maybe they're now potentially renting out one of the rooms, or whatever they're doing with those units. They're interested in the bigger ones. So, but there's a lot of small ones. So I think that's where it's quite interesting, the numbers. And that's why it doesn't make sense sometimes. When I thought at the beginning that, oh no, what's going to happen? Are the prices going to drop 25% like you said? It turns out it's resilient. It did drop a little bit, but not anywhere near the level you might expect during one of the worst financial crises in our generation.
Perfect.
But Mila, have you looked at any other cities outside of Toronto to see how they have been performing compared to Toronto?
Are these numbers which I looked at are based on GTA mostly. So it's, Trap is Toronto.
Yeah.
Let me focus on what I've prepared, because there is a lot of data and I want to go through this. And if you don't mind, I'll just go through the whole data with my highlights first, and then you'll add the stories, because I just want to off my chest the observations which I see without, I know a little bit about real estate, obviously, because I've been hearing some stories and following trends. but I wasn't watching the
Mm-hmm.
market specifically. And when I looked at these numbers, and this is the beauty, I'll start sharing, and I will start with saying, now we are turning to houses in the
Mm-hmm.
same area, which is mostly Toronto, as you rightfully said, Frank.
Mm-hmm.
And this graph told me the story, which Frank just told me what's happening, what has been happening in his professional life. So there were no transactions, or they dropped like 3 times in April and May, mostly, as he mentioned, probably are because of completions of whatever was there. But then look at here. So a lot of spikes. Yet I literally, without calculating much, if you sum up these deltas, these drops, and kind of overlay over here, we have a bit of increase, but not significant. So on average, we are having in the market the same number of sales.
Mm-hmm.
They were just deferred.
Exactly.
That's all.
Yeah, they hit the pause button basically.
Exactly. So it's a premature thing to say that the market is hot. No, it's average. People need to move. They couldn't move for a few months. Now they started. That's all. Now, in terms of listings, same story. If we look at these bars, and this is year 2020, obviously, and I think everybody should be able to see my mouse where I'm pointing. So that's the delta. It wasn't enough listed. Now it's a little bit more. And if we average it up, it pretty much comes to the same number as last year. So we are doing pretty balanced in terms of average. There is no heat in the market, activity, which means this is the famous sales to new listings ratio. Same type of indicator exists in stock market. And I actually find lately that there is a lot of similarity between stock market and real estate market, although obviously properties are significantly less liquid. And I'll speak a little bit more about that at the end. But we are having, look at this. We don't know what is going to happen here, right? Because November, December data are not available yet. But the sales to new listings ratio was actually quite average. I would even say lower, right, in the last few months. And what is interesting that historically, 2019 and 2018 were the years which I bet overall, if we had more years, it would show up. They were a bit abnormal. There were a lot of sales versus listings in November and December. So maybe at the end of the day, 2020 is not that different, that we are seeing a lot of activity now, because for some reason people started shopping more around Christmas.
Yeah. Well, people, everyone I talk to, they're on that realtor.ca app, just they're at home surfing for homes.
And partially, again, it may be our psychology. When there isn't much to do, people start thinking about, oh, well, should I renovate or should I buy a new thing?
Yeah. I've been noticing a lot of, I heard Home Depot sales are up. They're growing because a lot of people are doing that approach. So let's improve our bath. Let's remodel this. Let's do that, rather than taking the approach of moving.
Okay. Now I wanted to talk about the real factors behind this whole thing, because market works as long as there is money. There is money in people's pockets. There is money which banks are willing and able to lend. And the interest rates make sense. All of that ecosystem is working. So what is happening with economic indicators? Just again, numbers, we all know generally, but what is really obvious yet concerning, that our GDP dropped 40%. 40% drop in GDP is...
But you saw the Q3 number was up 40%, right?
No, I haven't seen. Nope.
So it's almost like that whole shutdown obviously destroyed the Q2, like that April and May couple months where people were terrified or whatever was happening. Now, like it's
almost back.
There was a lot of stimulus that went into that to create that 40% rebound, but
Exactly.
it is
But
yeah.
perfect timing that you said it. Now you can start seeing that it does make sense for tangible properties to continue appreciate when whatever we dropped, we seemingly, again, for now, temporarily gain back.
Mm-hmm.
So things are almost back to normal to certain people who still have employment and who still have jobs, and they can shop around. And obviously, we do have some employment growth in September, and we have unemployment dropping. Well, it was in the fall, obviously. Right now, the numbers will be skewed, but the point is that the economy seemed to be so far pretty resilient, which helps people to make longer term decisions like buying. And now I'm getting to the peak, so to speak, of my assessment. So I'll do a little spiel. Yes, I'll do a little spiel. And this is a very long-term trend. As you can see, it starts 2006 and it goes all the way to 2021. So it's 15-year trend. And what we have here, blue is sales to new listings and yellow is average price change. So this is the activity, the blue one, and the yellow is the price, essentially where the market finds a balance during this period. And it's very obvious, or after some thinking and consideration, but number one, of course, we had two dips. The first dip was 2008, infamous 2008, and we had a market crash there. And then 2018, price-wise, not the listings, but price-wise only, dip was regulatory. Mm-hmm. I'm not going there yet. I just wanted to show you those things. And two tops were 2010 and 2017. Now, after thinking what was happening these years, both of the dips were related to the fact that people could not get mortgages. Mm-hmm. It was liquidity crisis, as economists would say. Monetary policy was set in such a way that it wasn't about people, a bit people scared to sell in 2008. In 2018, nobody was scared, but people just couldn't get lending at that level that they used to.
Oh, the stress test, right?
Right, the stress test, and then some other restrictions and regulatory changes which were made on the liquidity side. And I must tell you that in my opinion, based on some other factors, and we'll speak to them later, but liquidity plays one of the biggest roles because frankly, in North America, on this continent, people don't have to have too much cash. Well, considering Europe, for example, where you have to put 30% or 40%, here mm-hmm. you have a potential to lend majority of debt. So essentially you have a leveraged buyout. You have a stock option on real estate. And when this dries up, then market stops moving. Mm-hmm. So this is hint number one, and we'll drive everything home at the end. Number two, 2010, what was happening? Canada is a resource-based country. I hope that I'm not making some revelation for you. Everybody knows that oil is important, gas is important. So far has been, okay, a disclaimer. And that was peak in oil prices, cash was abound, everything, people felt that everything is growing, so prices inflated. So it was in an expansion phase. That was a contraction phase. In real estate, that was expansion phase. And then the next expansion was more similar, in my humble opinion, to what's happening now, because it was Asian instability. And a lot of money started to flow in other jurisdictions, including Canada. Mm-hmm. And that instability created the external push as well as a bit of an anxiety. So again, emotional reactions of people started to drive market crazy.
Yeah, it's the fear of missing out, right?
Yes, the FOMO thing, which was rightfully shut down by regulators, but that dropped this. It was quite a swing, I must say. If
Oh yeah.
we,
Well, things were
yeah,
crazy in spring 2017. I recall that time, and I remember working with a few people, and it was just like we shouldn't have to compete 30 offers on uh on an offer, you know. Anyways, I found that quite interesting.
absolutely. And this is why that was a lot of foam in the market. And that was a bit of drought in the market. But overall, it balanced off. And look at this. Right now, we are not really very active. Still, we are below average, 10%, right? 10% growth, so to
Hmm.
speak, all in all. I'm not talking about prices. I'm talking about there is a natural trajectory of growth, just given that the number of units, the number of houses is growing, the number of people is growing. So it's natural to have more sales with time. There is
Hmm.
nothing wrong with that. And it's natural to have some prices increase with time. Again, there is nothing wrong with that. But we are getting a difference, right? Prices are a little bit more, and you can see a little bit more overheated, not like we are at any of these places based on this, but what is happening, we're definitely emotionally driven and externally driven because, again, we have an instability. That first one was expansion, that was raw, go, go. This was, oh, where do we park cash? And this one, well, how do we make our investments safe? How do we make our families safe? So that's my interpretation of what was happening. And the key finding, which truly just confirmed it one more time for me, is the liquidity is king.
Hmm. Yeah, and I feel like we're if it were not for the Bank of Canada, we'd probably be in some sort of liquidity crisis right now.
Perfect timing. Now, I truly wanted to share this and get into, before we conclude and do the Q&A, do a bit of intro into, okay, what about affordability and what about all this free money syndrome, which is happening?
Hmm.
Affordability in the period, which some of you may remember or some of you may have read books about, the high inflation. That was really bad, obviously. And the rents, both the houses and the rents, were hard to afford. And then we had a very long period when it was, however, it was discussed, but the changes were, insignificant. It was very stable. So what's interesting, we were starting to drive up a little bit, but the curve is definitely, we are curving down. So again, from the longer term trend perspective, I personally see no red signs of danger in terms of affordability, although obviously regulators may have a different opinion. It's my personal, I have no, or, oops, my apologies. But what is interesting, that was a red zone and it was clearly observed inflation. What is happening now is, I believe it's a hidden inflation driven situation.
Hmm.
Because there is a lot of liquidity which is pumped into the market. And while prices of food and the whole CPI has not risen significantly, at least yet, the prices of assets started to rise.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't think it's very hidden. It feels like inflation is people are observing it on the stock market. Like we're all-time high, and
You
then
know,
real estate as well,
yeah.
and the food. I wonder with food, like do you know how they calculate the CPI?
Yep, it's the consumer basket. And actually, I wanted to share. I recently listened to a podcast of where my favorite professor of economics at Rotman School of Management, he's been teaching executive MBA economics for last 20 years. And he said a marvelous thing. It's important to know where to look for inflation. If you don't know where to look, you will not find it.
Mm-hmm.
So the CPI, the basket, has been put together a long time ago to reflect, the price of gas, the price of bread, the price of milk, etc. Yet, if you think about it, when there is a lot of liquidity in the market, then where would it go? We cannot buy 100 piles of, milk and bread and all of that. Where do this extra billions and trillions of dollars go? They have two places: stock market and real estate market.
Mm-hmm.
So inflation is shifted to those two places.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, this is why there is no way down unless we go through some drastic fiscal problems.
Well, it seems exactly what you're saying is correct. Where do you find it? And are they going to tell us if there is actually 10% inflation or 7% inflation? Are they going to, because they're targeting 2%, right? That's their goal, is 2% inflation. And they can always adjust the numbers a little bit to make it how they want, right? How they want to display the metric.
Well, and truly, I don't want to spoil this prematurely, but I will bring it home in the second part, and I'm about to open up for questions right now. But I don't really think that regulators have much of a leeway, because there are certain things which have to be done based on where they are and how they perceive the situation, and it's not necessarily a big choice. So at this point, I want to open up if anybody has questions. We can definitely talk.
I have a lot of questions, Mila. I could ask you, I could ask you 10
Sure.
questions, but I want other people, obviously, if they have questions, to go first. But I'm super interested. Like your analysis was quite interesting. I like. So where do you think it's heading into the 2021? Like, do you think that this vaccine is going to drive confidence again?
Definitely, a vaccine is found by many people as kind of almost a saver, which would arrive and fix problems of being locked down and restart the economy. And I just started sharing the slide where I literally had some of these answers. Apart from the vaccine, which is temporary, right? I'm always focusing on longer term trends. So from longer term perspective, what is happening? And number one, I do believe that the prices of homes, which are not centrally located, but further located, it's not necessarily driven just by the pandemics. It is a longer term trend, and it's not a bubble. It's more of a paradigm shift, which is happening. It's just accelerated by the pandemic because it's shown people, and it shifted a lot of companies to this mixed work, remote and on-prem. For some industries and for some businesses, it's impossible to work, right? Because they may need to produce some specific things or be on site. So with that...
we had a question from Gwen.
Oh, sure. So Gwen asked, do you think that the hidden inflation of single-family housing and stock market is a high risk for those in both? Gwen, I would love to defer this question to the second part, because I will show certain numbers. I can't answer now, but it will be so much better if I shown the numbers and said,
okay,
why?
Just curious, because I'm in both. So,
frankly, most of us are in both, because where else can we go?
Put our money anyway. Yeah, I hear you.
There is no other place to hide unless we are just selling everything and converting into wonderful piles of gold and moving it in Fort Knox.
Or
Yeah,
go buy some Bitcoin.
We're not sure if it's in there.
Right, and this will be a question which a lot of us will be asking. But yes, this is partially why I wanted to have this conversation, to show numbers, to look at trends once again myself, and to come to certain conclusions which would be evidence-based, not just emotional. Oh, I want to have at least something tangible. Because stock market, especially stock market, currently is driven mostly by emotions. Real estate, a little bit more, still emotional. So I'll run ahead and just say, I think it's a no. It's not a high risk overall, but it depends on where, and I will share why further.
Actually, I have an anecdote. My mentor told me once when I got into real estate, and he told me he's been through many of these cycles. So he was through the 89 cycle and 2008, and just he's been through it. And what he told me is that, Frank, as long as you don't buy more than you can afford and you don't get caught out having to sell at the wrong time, you're going to be fine in real estate. But there is a lot of people who get greedy and they buy too much, or they take risks that are a little bit irresponsible sometimes, because it's the feeling that they can win big quickly. If it's gambling sometimes for some people. I think homes are not meant to be a gambling piece. It should be a place that you live and that you can hopefully afford, and that there's measures in place to protect buyers so that the lenders will not give them higher than a certain ratio, hopefully. And so I think that it's generally safe to have your home, but then it's when people buy 10 condos or 20 condos or whatever that they do, and they're leveraged, and maybe the rent drops at a certain time. I've seen a lot of people owning those Airbnb units, and then travel shut down, and then they're stuck with 10 units that they're paying for. And if they can't fill the unit, then they're massive negative cash flow. So I think it's about who you are, and it depends on, are you one of those super risk takers, or are you more of a responsible person and you bought what you can afford? And even if it goes down, as long as you don't have to sell, you're not really in a big risk scenario.
Excellent point. Cannot agree more. This is important to be in a position to be able to afford temporary carrying some assets. And how long temporary, it's a good question, but I would say for a majority of people who are cautious, it would be half of a year. Mm-hmm. Usually it's never required, but it's a good number to make sure that you can carry things which are leveraged. Stocks usually are not leveraged, and I'm not talking about professionals who do this whole spiel. But with real estate, it's almost always leveraged. So it's important to be in a position to be able to pay for it mm-hmm. for a little bit longer if it's an investment. And if it's your personal, obviously, it's a question of cash flow, etc.
Yeah, I've seen some people really deep into the whole, the pharmaceutical stocks, or the Tesla type of pushers. And I look at the value of Tesla, and it's, last I looked at it, was over 60% of the automotive market the value was in Tesla. Mm-hmm. So I don't think they are selling the most cars. I don't think they're making the most profit. It's an idea, and they believe that it's a transformative sort of technology or company. So it's speculating on future sort of growth. But I think there's a lot of that sort of risky type investors out there. And then there's people that own the blue chips, and they're getting their dividends or whatever they're getting. So different investors are different, right?
Absolutely. We are getting a bit of our, so to speak, of the conversation. Mm-hmm. Yet I must say, from my experience and what I observed, of course, it's important to focus on what you want to achieve. If you want huge growth quickly, you have no other choice but accept high risks and know that you can lose most of that. if you want to go through the trying times, which are now and ahead of us, and save or keep your earned money, then you can place your bets and your positions in something which is safer in terms of sectors, locations, both real estate and stocks. And let me talk through these trends so it will become clearer from the real estate. Is it safe? Is it not safe? What is safer? What is a better choice? And it applies to both homes where we live or homes which we are buying, or whatever condos we are buying, so other people can live there. So we give them that opportunity. So the first longer term trend, as I started saying, is that houses which are located further will continue, maybe average, but appreciation. Definitely, whatever has a piece of land will be valued in the years to come. It's a question of being able to carry it through in, ups and downs. The second thing is a return to work in 2021 or, whenever, but people will return to work, and it may be a hybrid model, but it's very unlikely. If you look through all of the recent stats and articles and conversations between CEOs, it's extremely unlikely that everybody will stay working remotely, because this is not the most efficient and effective model of running businesses. People need to see each other, at least from time to time. They need to interact. They need to make decisions collectively, which is hard doing it like we are doing it right now through screens. So there will be a balance of work from home and office, which means that people will return to work, especially downtown. Downtowns, think about Middle Ages when there was plague or huge diseases, and people were just, the cities were dead, right? People were flocking from cities. Every and single time people returned to cities, rebuilt cities, and made them flourish even better. So definitely people and organizations will return downtown. Will they redo some offices? Sure. Will they repurpose some spaces? Positively. But that, at the end of the day, means more jobs and more work. So that's okay. And some companies may not survive. Yes, we appreciate, and this is a natural part of evolving, the economic evolution and going through the crisis. Yet overall, definitely those central areas will be populous again, maybe more with the younger generation. The outskirts will be still in demand for people who have families, and demographics and immigration will drive the recovery, will drive up demand. So there is no other longer term, within 2-3 years, there is no other option but prices. Forget about the inflation. For now, I'm just stripping out. Let's say on average, if we consider inflation, prices will still continue climbing up because of the pressure, supply versus demand. And Toronto will, it's not rocket science. I don't think that I'm all, it's a revelation, but it will recover first because it's central city. It has most jobs. It has the strongest job market and the tightest condition in terms of, hey, there is no space to build. So currently people are out of the city, fine, but they will come back. Maybe a slightly different mix. Maybe it will be mostly immigrants and tourists and younger people, generation, etc. But it doesn't really matter from the big economy and stats perspective. And
I actually think that there's there potential double cohort there as well. Like if you look at the demographic of the people who are planning to right size or downsize into the condo sort of lifestyle, the older generation that maybe they're prepping. They don't want to necessarily have the big 2-story home anymore because their kids are gone and they want to have less space to take care of. And I think there's a lot of demand for those big condos and not a lot of supply for that reason. They haven't built enough of those big units to meet the demand of, I think there's the second cohort is the young families. So I think at a certain price point, single family homes become unaffordable for people. So what is your alternative? It's a bigger condo, maybe a 2-bedroom with a den. So you can still have a family and live and maybe still be close to that hybrid work. Because I agree with you that there is no, it is less efficient to work through Zoom compared to having your colleague next to you and being able to mastermind with them. I think it's, and people want that for their own mental health as well. They do want to go back to the office. It's not as, it's more fun. It's way more fun to be at the office. I think cities are more fun. There's way more going on.
And what's interesting is different industry sectors, when I speak to people, they have a variety of opinions. Some want mostly to work from home, and a lot of IT people feel that way because obviously their job is more related to actually writing something using a computer than interacting. Still, it definitely will be a hybrid model when maybe 1 or 2 days in the office for some, or 3 days in the office for others, and other 2 or 3 days working from home will allow to spread people more and to choose whether they prefer this condo central lifestyle, provided that, you know, they have whatever the affordability for the family unit, or further. But again,
Mila, don't you think this trend was already happening before even the pandemic? Because I've looked at the banks, they have, some of their offices have those hot desks. So you don't really have a dedicated desk. You have a place you have to reserve. And the consulting firms, they encourage their employees, go work on your client's site, be next to your client. Don't be in the office all the time because you're not making us money if you're sitting here. You're costing us money by sitting here. So I think that was already, the pandemic is a convenient thing for some companies that already wanted to reduce their office overhead.
Absolutely. Yes, there will be, as I mentioned, definitely there will be conversions of some office space. Yet here, I think we're perfectly positioned for me to share what is happening with commercial real estate, as well as I wanted to touch on the government debt and lending. Because those 3 pieces, well, the commercial real estate tells us a bit of a saga. I think, again, numbers talk. And they told me a story about what's happening with offices and industrial space and, you know, the rest. So TREB, again, it's Commercial Realty Watch, and it's the 3rd quarter. What we expected. I said mixed bag because there are things which went as expected. We obviously needed more storage, and we needed less in-person retail. Without even explaining, I think it's pretty clear. So with that, industrial leases, it's about lease first, were steady. You see prices almost flat. Low availability, and yet extra demand for distribution. Retail 30% down, again, for clear reasons. Hey, there are so, who's leasing? And what's not expected, I was actually quite shocked seeing that office lease rates was up 40% year to year. This is a whooping number. So what does it tell us? That office is not dead. And let me tell you why I think those numbers are there. People and businesses who needed offices mostly are professionals. Professionals were able to work from homes, but those businesses, as an example, accounting businesses, where they truly need their team on site during filing time because it's a crunch time, it's impossible to do, Zooms and all of that. It's just people will go nuts. They have to be able to work on clients' files together. But now there are restrictions on space, and they're literally renting more because they need to place all these people with 2-meter perimeter.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're renting more, there is competition. And when there is competition, it's a supply and demand. Look at that. Office lease rates 40% up.
They could also be trying to make up for some of the lost revenue from all the vacancy. So if you have a big portfolio and a bunch of your office tenants are starting to leave for whatever reason, you can just charge the other people more money, the ones that are coming.
That's a good point, that there may
I,
have been a rollover of tenants. And because of that new tenant coming in, it was more of the market price, but still.
I'm not a commercial guy, but I only do a few deals here and there in commercial space. But that number actually surprised me. When you said 40% increase, I didn't know that. So that's interesting, actually.
Now let's look further. So these are the lease rates, right? This is our industrial, the same. This is the commercial, right? The yellow is new. It's kind of inversed in this bar chart. Usually I would expect it on the right. So please do not be fooled. The yellow is 2020, the blue is 2019. So this is where we are seeing retail dropped and office spiked.
Mila, I have a question for you, actually. What do you think the emergency wage subsidy had to play into this? Like, do you think that the actual government stimulus might have caused a little bit of this discrepancy?
Might have, because some of these businesses may have decided to close down anyway because they couldn't survive since their working capital was non-existent. Essentially no cash, even if you get a loan, but because you have to pay back and there are no customers. And now the second wave and the third wave, it's brutal. So people were closing down. While offices, they may have been continuing and taking the subsidy. And again, I would say that it's hard for me to draw wide and broad conclusions.
We've got to ask a commercial guy and see what the real the truth is behind that. I'm super curious on that, actually. I'm going to ask after this. I'm going to go call one of my buddies to ask him, why is this number this number?
Yeah, it would be interesting to hear from brokers. I talked to people who actually leased more office space, and I heard the story from businesses from that side, why they did what they did. So the lease space, and this is an interesting, the activity, it's a little bit increased, mostly on the industrial side. Commercial retail, there was no change, and office actually less. So what we are saying, the available office space, I guess, was not too much, and the competition for the office space, because that's the only conclusion we can draw, was high, and that's why the spike in price. While industrial space, there was some spare capacity, some, I guess, lags, which was picked up. And that's why the price stayed flat, because they leveraged just to lease whatever was remaining for distribution and storage. Now, in terms of sales, this is fun. Less sales expected, because obviously people, it's not the best time to buy commercially, maybe to sell, yes, but to buy commercially, it's really uncertain. But all segments bought and sold less, but commercial retail was still the highest. This is mind-boggling. So I guess people were picking up maybe for less price. And let's look at the sales price now. Nope. Yep, exactly. So retail was turning over better because the price went down so significantly that I guess those buyers said, what the heck, we would just buy these spaces and eventually we'll need them.
Yeah, they're banking.
Yes. And office, whooping again, 40% increase in the sales price as well. So this is driving back my point, which I said at the beginning. Office space is not dead, and the market is voting for this.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think there's a lot of confidence that everything will return. I think the vaccine is the saver, so to speak. We have another person in the waiting room.
Oh, please.
They dropped off.
Oh, yes, I wasn't sure. So last thing or last section which I wanted to talk about is government debt. Yep, that's somebody, let me admit. And this is a part where I think all of us are emotional and all of us are asking questions. Are we doing the right thing? Do we want to continue? But we cannot stop right now. What is happening? And let's talk numbers. So currently, clearly, Canada's response is to spend and ignore the deficit, at least for now. We've already, as a country, invested or spent 37 and 77 in just CRB benefits, which were paid to every person who's been working before the lockdown started. And it does make total sense because obviously people were stripped of work because government told them that you can't do this any longer. So that was a fair exchange for compliance. Yet what is happening is this transition plan, which supports Canadians out of work, right now we are objectively, whether we feel it or not, in the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. And the only reason why we are not feeling it is because of a third of the trillion dollars, Canadian dollars, which have been pumped up into the economy. This is roughly, again, for everybody who's listening, just to make it very simple, it's 1/5 of our GDP, of the total economic output of this country, which we spend just handing in money to keep liquidity in the markets. And there are multiple trains of thoughts. I'm not even going to go through all of the theories, of monetary theories and models and stimulus approaches. A lot of economists were speaking on this. Again, I was listening to what Doug Hyatt was saying in that podcast very, very closely, because he is a very prominent economist. So at the end of the day, our fiscal position as a country deteriorated the quickest among the G20. The source is IMF. You can Google it. It's easy to find. What does it mean? It means that Canada printed and given more stimulus than any other country in G20 so far, which made us feel protected and safe, yet at the expense of, when there are constraints, I'll just be a little bit off track right now, but I'll share what I think, which may not be comfortable, but that's when we have a constraint, when we have a crisis, if we are left to our, so to speak, our problems, then we start acting and finding the way out pretty quickly because it's painful. It's a crisis. We have to move, and we have that stress and constraints actually helping us to find the way out. If we are numbed for a period of time, we know that we are in stress, we know that it's a problem, that we are trapped, then there are certain things which are not good, but we keep being injected some medication, some painkiller. It makes us less and less likely to actually act and react and to innovate and go through change. And eventually, when painkiller is removed, we still have to do this because obviously we will have to solve for certain things. And I'm not saying one way or the other is better because frankly, it depends on the size of the wound. If this is a life-threatening situation and you don't give a patient a painkiller, he can die through a pain shock, right? So it sounds like and looks like US is taking a less painkiller, more of fight it through approach currently. Canada is taking more of the, okay, let's make it smooth and safe and protect it and figure how we solve for that later. And I don't think that there is a right or wrong. But currently what's happening already is that we already stripped of the AAA rating by one of the rating agencies. What does it mean? It means that if more of them take away this thing, then Canada will not be able to borrow cheap money from international markets, which means that the interest rates will have to rise, which means that we'll have to pay for this debt at $250 billion, not what we are paying now, and I'll show you at the very next slide, but more. And that is dangerous. Because think about the household, if you borrowed more money than you can pay interest for, and interest starts rising, what are your options? Sell something to pay down some debt, or, go fiscal insolvent. And I actually lived through it in the country which chose the second way. Sometimes it's a matter of life and right choices, but still, this is a difficult point. And so the last thing which I wanted to mention, this is very clear for any of you who have any doubts that we are fully 90+% dependent on US, I can bring you a bitter truth. We are. Canada is dependent on US more than on GDP. If US sneezes, Canada starts shivering. I actually ran the model myself, guided by famous Doug Hyatt, who I mentioned already twice or three times, and I saw the correlation and how that works. And because US is in a deeper trouble than Canada in terms of the fiscal deficit, and they are on the milestone which they haven't seen since the war, the big war, it is a very interesting time in terms of the government debt. I just truly wanted to bring this home so all of us realize that there is a bigger force in the market. It's not just the supply and demand in real estate and stock market, but this is actually, to me, a bigger trend. This is almost like a tsunami, which we need to watch where it's going and figure. Now I'll go back to the question which Gwen has asked. What does it mean to those markets? What this cost of free money means? A couple of more charts which I wanted to show you, and it's very easy to find them because all the sources are here. So what's happening is comparing to, Great Britain, US, Brazil, etc., all this G20, right? So this is our Canada. We did a lot of discretionary spending. What does it mean, discretionary? It means that we could have handed out checks or not, handed out to certain people, etc. And again, I know that I can receive a lot of negative response. I'm not judging anything. I'm just stating the fact. We are where we are. The decisions were made for 100 very valid reasons. It doesn't really matter. But currently, we are here, which means that we need to figure out how to deal with that on the country level. And that's not our job because we're just speaking as citizens, right? Mm-hmm. And on our individual levels, as people who are holding, households, people who essentially run their lives. What do we do knowing that we collectively chose this path? Because there will be a permanent economic impact. And this chart I wanted to show you, not to again say that any of these marvelous leaders, because I do believe, however, you kind of people label the leaders of nations. At the end of the day, it's not an easy job. And there are no right or wrong answers. It's just the answers which are best given the circumstances. But this is what's been happening. These people, these prime ministers, were able to shrink the debt. This prime minister, unfortunately, had to rise the debt for all the reasons which they took into consideration. And thankfully, again, I think it's a pretty old chart because Fraser Institute probably did it before they committed to other billions of funding. I think now it's got to rise almost to 20%. But we will have to have some of those new leaders who would do the same blue thing in some way.
It's helicopter money.
So interest costs, right? What we are paying now, it's a government debt service. I mean, we're not paying from our pocket, but we're paying through tax, etc. This is what we are paying now. When Canada is rated as AAA economy, which has started to deteriorate. If we lose that status, it can double easily. Okay? And the last thing which I wanted to mention, which is important before we drive all of this home, is that whole spending actually is 75% more after adjusted for inflation. It's not the same money, but when we adjust it for inflation, it's 3/4 more than what Canada spent during the Second World War. 4 years. So it's significant. And we do need to pay attention to how this will unveil in the future, because I'm not going to say something which will help you to make your decisions in the next 3 or 4 years. You'll have to watch for this. We can obviously record more lives, we can have conversations, but the point is, this is much bigger and more significant trend, which is overlapping and overlaying what we were talking about in terms of supply and demand. What else is important for both stock market and our real estate market is job market, right? Because people have to have money to actually pay for all this wonderful stuff they invested in and just to carry on through with their lifestyle. So while we are seeing, and this is from CIBC, I love Benjamin Tal, the chief economist from CIBC. Whenever you have an opportunity, you can find him. He's a public figure. You can just listen to or read up short summaries. He's brilliant. So in December, he and his colleague, Katharina, wrote up a report. And they said what I was saying from just confirmed my observation from September, October, that we have an asymmetrical job market, which means they are, some of the international experts call it K-shaped recovery. Service sector is going this way. Professional sector is going that way. Some people have more jobs and earn more money, or at least the same amount. And some people lost jobs altogether. So those sectors which continue having jobs, they will drive the economy and the demand for the type of housing they prefer, which are houses and investments in condos and houses. And people who lost are mostly the low-income earners. They were renters, frankly, to begin with. And they have right now a perfect opportunity to trade up their units to get into something less expensive and better. So I feel that there is an opportunity for both of these segments, yet I really feel for university graduates who have been hit and this whole economic inequality. And provided that we just went through the spiel and now realize how much money had been printed and injected in the cost of money, I truly think that government will have no choice but to make hard decisions in terms of economic redistribution of profit.
Yeah, I agree with you. They have to tax more, right? That's the only way that we can pay back the money.
Right. And this tax more will fall onto people who are making money, meaning professionals and whoever kept jobs, so employment. They may choose to tax businesses the same, at least during difficult times, just so some businesses can, recover.
Well, you could look at the municipalities like Vancouver as an example. They're looking at every way they can rate. They're in a significant shortfall. So they're looking at new ways of taxing. So things like tolls, like road tolls, property taxes. They're talking federally about even like, what is it, foreign buyers tax federally. There's Toronto's talking about vacant homes taxes. So this conversation's already started. They're looking at how can they unlock that cash that Canadians are sitting on. I don't know if you saw that interview with our finance minister where she's pleading with people to unlock the cash. But Canadians are sitting on record cash pile right now. I think it's a couple $100 billion at least that they're, because it makes sense, right? If you're in a scary time, do you want to take big risks, or do you want to protect your core and just let's conserve, let's save as much as we can?
Right. Yet, as a mathematician, what I did, I looked at those numbers. It was a 90 billion, or maybe right now it's 120, whatever. Let's for simplicity say it's 90 billion, and we have 30 million Canadians, and let's say there are 10 million households. Again, for simplicity, Frank, simple are fifth grade math, just because it's millions and billions, right? So 90 billion divided by 10 billion comes to how many thousand? $9,000.
Yeah.
Are 9,000 or 90?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not.
Nine. But even if we say that only 1 million of these households have money and the rest don't really have money because they weren't having any cash reserves, right? Still, it would bring us to maybe 40, 50,000. I'm not saying it's insignificant, but if you really put it to, how much each of the families have, and of course there will be skewed distribution. Some of them may have a couple of 100,000, but the rest may have 5, 10. Hey, what is the pile of money we're sitting on?
Yeah.
It's maybe money tucked away for just going through this 6 months. Maybe they parked some money because they wanted to invest, and now they're literally at a loss of what should we invest? Should we buy? Should we not buy? What do we do? While money is significant from the economy standpoint, because 90 billion is a significant number, but when we are looking at the household and, for example, thinking about investing in the next real estate, how much can you buy for even $90,000 in, forget about Toronto, okay, just go the whole Ontario, right? 10% down maybe, but usually you wouldn't qualify. So I'm just be really mindful of all these numbers which economists are throwing out, and then divide by the population and figure what is the true amount of cash which people have.
It's super interesting. I don't know, but I think it's a good question to ask. How is that money? Where is it going to be deployed? Are people going to believe that investing in real estate is the right place to deploy it, or are they going to? Because I can anecdotally from my own life, I know that I'm still spending because I have a family. I still have to spend a certain amount of money, but we didn't take luckily we took a family trip in January. So we had our family trip, but then since then we haven't traveled at all. So that's right there, savings of lots of money. And then we're not eating out at restaurants anymore. We're cooking at home. So we're saving money there. So there is some, and I can't go to the Raptors games or go watch entertainment concerts or any of that sort of thing. So you're saving in some areas, and you're also trying to be conservative. Maybe we don't need to buy as many clothes because we can live with what we've got. We can be in our PJs sometimes at home. So I guess to me, I find it interesting, but I feel that there is a huge inequality, like you were saying, and that inequality or that gap is increasing. So you have some rich people getting substantially more rich, and then you have some people, or many people, that are suffering. And I think that's where you've been to Costco and to Walmart, it's full of people, but then the mom and pop stores is closed. So I think there is a big disparity there, which I'm not comfortable with, but it is what it is. Like, we're just looking at the numbers, right?
Right. And this is why I believe that government will have no choice but to spend more to support some. And again, that will be up to the regulators, how they decide it, because there is that fine balance. Some of the businesses doesn't make sense to support. They should truly be closed down because they're not creating enough value added.
Have you
for
heard about
everybody.
the change to the CMHC program? So for there's a program basically where they would lend some money as a secondary loan to people that are first-time buyers to purchase real estate. And there was a limit on the purchase price somewhere in the, I'm not a mortgage guy, but let's say it's somewhere in the 500,000 range or 550,000 range.
Right.
They increased it up to 720,000 or so. So they basically made it so that, taking into account that a lot of people live in Vancouver or Toronto or Montreal or Calgary, cities that maybe the home will exceed the $500,000 threshold. So now they're trying to encourage people to say, you can buy a house, we'll give you 10% interest free, so you can buy this home, or 5% interest free, and we'll pay us back when you sell the thing with your profits.
Frank, this is immediately to me. Remember that curve which has shown liquidity, right? They're pumping up liquidity, which is not just money, but lending liquidity, which will help to drive the demand for housing in that range, which is mostly condos, up. So I immediately can see that condos will recover faster than they would have without that CMHC thing. Okay.
Yeah. I think they want to encourage people. They want to encourage people to buy real estate. I think it's something that it makes sense because you're creating something new. You're employing people to build that thing.
You are taking money off the chest and pumping it into economy. That's exactly what the minister was saying, right? Let's get it that way. Absolutely. So I wanted now to bring all of that together and speak about, okay, who's impacted, which we kind of covered before, and what does it mean for us? So the key driving forces, I see them three, are the market balance, which is the famous supply and demand. And we talked through that extensively today. And even that CMHC announcement, again, think about any new announcements from the lens of, okay, how will that affect supply and demand? And then you'll become your own crystal ball thinker, because you will know which way the trend, the wave, will be shifting next before the next new announcement. The second one is access to lending for real estate. This is key. Stock market to a certain degree is affected as well, because a lot of people, what they do and what they did historically, they would take some of money which was in home equity lines and invest in stock market just to be diversified, right? Because real estate is one thing, blue chips is another thing, maybe some dividend-based companies are another thing, right? So again, if we have more liquidity, more ability to take cash from the properties, then that's the access to lending. And of course, the interest rates and inflation. So think about it. Supply and demand, we talked about the longer term trend, it's going up. The balance, the pricing, so to speak, the curve. Access to lending, I truly believe what Frank just shared, this is a signaling from the government that they are going to carefully but lax the lending in certain areas to help the economy restart. The same will be with businesses, because I bet you it will be more lending which will be made available or secured somehow by the government, etc., to make sure that businesses can lend money to restart, because there is no working capital left in many of them, or it's short. And you cannot run the engine, the car, without gas. You need to fill up the tank. And that's the lending. And finally, the interest rate and inflation. We are walking a very fine line right now in Canada, because I just shown you that we are about to lose our triple rating, which will force the government to increase the rates because they have to compete for international lending. Yet, on the other hand, they truly cannot afford it. So I would say that as long as the right things are done and the economy is restarted in a certain way that is perceived by other countries, rating agencies, and other financial institutions outside of Canada as, yes, Canada is doing the right thing. It's going to be able to pay off the debt, at least the interest, because look at everybody else. Everybody else is in debt like this too. So if this is happening, then the interest rates will not change for a long period of time. And think about why again. If they increase the interest rate, we won't be able to service the debt. Which means to us that inflation will not be in the CPI. It will be 2%, 3%, 4%, or maybe even deflationary on the surface. What I mean on the surface is the prices of tangible assets, both stocks, the good stocks, those which have value, and real estate will continue increasing, adjusted for inflation, but not the CPI inflation. Because money is almost like, imagine it's like air or water. It fills up the container. And if there isn't much to fill up on the consumables and this, discretionary stuff, well, actually the stocks and real estate is discretionary to be precise, but essentially it goes in the other areas. So for those who have some money, that's definitely a secure investment against the global inflation, which again will be happening. They may not call it that way, but this is just the result of our monetary stimulus to invest in property. And again, with all the due disclaimers, this is not an investment advice. This is just for you some solid foundation how to make decisions and look at the new things and data and information which will keep coming up. And I believe that rates in Canada will have to remain low unless, and that is a possibility, we cannot say it will not happen, unless Canada is forced to choose to default. Which is a totally different conversation in the ball game. But again, I lived through that scenario. I know exactly that as long as you can carry the thing, and that will be much harder through a default. So a lot more people may lose. But those who can afford to carry through the prices of these properties after going through the whole default and hyperinflation, which always is associated with that, will go through the roof. So in conclusion, from my perspective, and I'll share mine and let Frank share his, I believe this is right now a buying opportunity. In certain sectors, I'm not saying every single piece, of course, or whatever real estate or every stock, just go and buy Tesla for, all money which you have. But it's a buying opportunity for those looking for more, for better options. And it's an opportunity for renters or people who lost jobs or income to find a better housing right now, to shop around. And I believe that condos will still be attractive and continue being attractive to entry-level buyers, and there will be demand which is stronger and stronger in the years to come.
Mila, that was amazing. Yeah, I agree with you on pretty much every point you've said. It all makes logical sense, and it's because you've derived it from data, your conclusions. And I think you're right that they are providing. I guess one thing I might disagree with, I don't think that we're going to default. I don't think that they're going to, because they can continuously, the Bank of Canada said that they were going to keep rates low, right? The new, the minister, he said, or the chairman of the Bank of Canada said, it was Macklem. He said, if you're thinking of making a big purchase, don't worry, the rates are not going up. If anything, they might even go down further. They might stimulate further to try to get people activated into the market. And I think I look at it from the perspective of, from an outside perspective, is Canada a desirable place to be? Would you, if you were in another country, would you think Canada is a good brand? Is it a brand that you want to be associated with? You want to drink that water, breathe that air, live in that country that has solid laws and rules and diversity of culture? I think we still have a very positive brand globally. And I think a lot of the policies that the government is undertaking is with that assumption that we have a desirable place to be here. And people we can hold them back, and they want it even more. So I think that's where Canada, I would not bet against Canada ever. I think it's an amazing place. And we have a lot of assets to work with. And I think that mainly it comes down to, do people want to be here? And I believe they do. And I think a lot of smart people want to be here. My concern is, now that the US is maybe shifting to more of an open mindset, with their new president, that maybe we'll have to compete with them a little bit more. We've had a monopoly on all the people that want to come to North America. We've been getting the smartest people, the brightest people, because maybe they didn't want to go to a Trump-run country. But now it's a different story. So I think we're going to have to, I think it's aggressive to try to get 400,000 quality people into a country in 1 year, any country. But let's say, assume US is also a very desirable place to be. So I think we're going to have challenges finding the best of the best, but I think people will still come to Canada because we have the universal healthcare, we have the clean environment, we do have the great financial system that's stable, that's been stable through the last financial crisis, and we're still seemingly stable. So I think we'll be fine. I am optimistic, and I think what you're saying regarding the whole stimulus, I think we're at this point where they are going to encourage housing. That's a major part of our GDP at this point. So housing, the lending, all the ancillary GDP creation that goes along with the creation of that housing, we're pretty much a housing centric society at this point. So I think but I always go back to what my mentor said: don't do something that's irresponsible that you can't afford, because unless you have a solid, stable job and you're can pay those bills, you shouldn't take on a massive debt. You should be responsible, make as big a down payment as you can, and buy the thing you can afford to own and carry for at least 6 months, like you said, if something happens. So but I think people should take advantage. If you're a renter, you should take advantage of the opportunity. You're in a position, for once in the past decade, you're in a position where you can call some shots and you can find options for yourself. You can get discounted rental. Like I think we're back down to 2016 or 2017 levels of rental rates. So it's a substantial decrease in the core. And you should, if you're paying 2019 rents, you should negotiate, or you should move. Because I don't think it'll be like that once they open the floodgates. If, let's assume that the vaccine is effective and people are able to come again, I think it's going to be hard to find the deals, because when people come, they're looking for, they're solving that challenge, which is, I need a place to live so I can live my Canadian dream.
Absolutely.
So I'm optimistic. I feel like it's going to pick up a lot next year. I'm looking at next year as being probably potentially one of the biggest of my career. This year was challenging, but I'm happy that we're all healthy and we can continue to go ahead. And I'm actually happy that we did this thing as well, because I think it's really important to share in this format, this long format, where we can talk through ideas. And looking at some of your slides, it really creates interesting conversation. So I hope we can do it again in the future with maybe some other topics too.
Truly, yes, truly was a very interesting, and I love the dynamics that we are able to discuss and share perspectives. And I love the fact that you brought in our notion of brand, because this is a big thing in business. And I love businesses. I love transformation. Change is hard, but this is what I've been doing the last 20 years. And brand can carry through the business, people, organizations through difficult times. I do agree with you that Canada so far has an impeccable brand and a lot of assets, even through climate change and all of that, which we haven't touched. There are a lot of advantages. So I'm quite positive that there will be ways found to deal with the monetary influx, and we will figure how to restart. And real estate definitely is going to continue being something which people who move to Canada want to have. Because think about even Canada and US, the last thing which I wanted to share is think about who comes to US and who comes to Canada. Different reasons, different type of people. US, more business entrepreneurial startups, drive some new innovation, although I know that Canada would love to have all those people, but mostly who's coming to Canada is either investors with money who are looking for stability, for good life, for good quality of living. They can actually travel and spend time in more southern locations, but they love this particular stability and they love housing and land and all of that. Or it's professionals who are coming because they know that it's easier to land and it's easier to get the citizenship than in US, and it's less turbulent and more predictive. Because I've heard about many people I know even personally who came to Canada, then moved to US, and now back to Canada and saying, no, that's okay. We'll get a little bit less, but oh my God, that stress which we went through the last couple of years, no longer.
Yep.
So different people, different choices. So it's almost like, again, in business, the segmentation, we are targeting different sectors of immigration. So
Yep.
I think we should be pretty good. And I wanted to say big thank you for everybody who joined us. Truly appreciate Gwen staying with us to the end. And Gwen, anything which you would like to either ask or share, or anything that now kind of comes to mind after our long interactive chat?
Well, I found it very interesting, and between the two of you, you gave some great data points. I made quite a few notes, and it certainly reassured me that, over time, things will certainly for my life, I should be fine, given that we don't go into default as a country, which I agree is highly unlikely. And the thing I do worry about, though, is well, there's two things. One, I think travel has been significantly affected, and people have redirected their money to other things other than travel because they have this extra money, so they're spending it on their houses or to renovate or whatever, or they're putting it in the bank. And I do think people will ultimately come out and spend the money they saved. I mean, it's pretty, if you are working full time and you normally go downtown and buy lunch and you buy the transit ticket and all that, that money is, and you go to restaurants and so on, that money is logically going to stay in your bank account until the future. And I really do think the government has made a great effort to try to keep the country in balance. The concern I've got is small business and the restaurant owners are going to be most negatively affected. And there are a lot of good entrepreneurs out there who are going to have trouble adjusting. And I really do hope that they come back, that our life isn't going to be too dramatically changed once the vaccine is distributed. I mean, as a general society, I'm talking at a bigger level, that our society will not have changed that much in a year.
Well, I
Well,
can't
I
wait to
tried.
have a dinner sort of gathering with my friends and with you all, and just when it does become allowed again, or
It's going to
safe,
be.
I want to go to the restaurants. I
Absolutely.
want to do all these things. I want to go watch the Raptors and the Jays, and this is not something that I look forward to the day when we can again. I think people are going to be, it's going to be like a weight's lifted off our shoulders once this COVID is gone, and people will be excited to live even more than ever before. So I'm
Yeah.
hoping that this debt is not too much for us to pay back. Like that's my concern. Did it have to be this big of a debt? But it is what it is, and we just have to now adapt to it and figure out new ways of being, right.
Right. So we're social beings. It's very hard to be uh, in a box, staying in a box for a period of time for safety. So I think you're right. I think people will embrace the new world and not take it as much for granted as we have. There's so many things we took for granted that hopefully we can live our normal lives very soon. But thank you both very much. It was very good session, and
Thank you, Gwen.
good work went into this.
Can I make a plug for my my real estate thing?
Sure.
So I started a YouTube channel, and it's something I've always wanted to do. And Mila actually inspired me to a certain extent, watching her and what the business that she's created for herself. So I finally decided, I set this whole thing up. It's obviously a work in progress, but I set it up, and I've been recording videos every day, live streaming every single day, talking about the real estate market. So if anyone is interested in what's happening in primarily in new developments, if you'd please check out my YouTube channels, Your Condo TV, and that's where I'm sharing my basically it's builder content, new developments. I'm just following the news of what's happening in the space. So hopefully I can see some of you there.
Okay.
And my goal is to get to 1,000 subscribers. So right now I'm at maybe like 15. I just launched the channel, but once I get to 1,000, I can actually live stream from my phone. So that's my goal. So I can also then do kind of field trips and doing all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And I'm sure that we are going to have a few other similar sessions, which we're going to stream on my YouTube channel, because I find that between the Facebook and YouTube, probably YouTube videos are staying longer, and I totally agree with Frank that it does make sense to share information and to put it out there so people make better choices.
Yes.
And
well, these conversations, well, they live on, like, let's say, for example, we recorded it, we put it online, but also this in and of itself, this conversation gave me value. So I gained some information. It's going to be with me tomorrow and with all the other clients I see. So I love doing this kind of stuff. Any chance I can get to talk about real estate or the financial markets and business, I want to have those convos and record them. So that way they live forever.
And the last thing which I wanted to invite whoever is watching the replay or listening is put in the comments on this video, and I did send a link to the YouTube channel. Just put any questions or anything which you may have of an interest, and we'll focus on that next time.
Okay, great.
Brilliant.
Well, I've got to go. Thank you.
Yes.
And take care. Bye.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.